Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today to our mental health webinar. You know, we have talked about this issue in the past, but today we're going to break it down a little bit more. We're talking a little bit about anxiety and depression. We know there's so many different layers to this, and I have four very special guests with me today. Bianca Everett, who is an entrepreneur and the founder and CEO of Team, which is a social media app. Jenny Valina Monzon, who is the co-founder of DM Digital, and of course, Laura Bambaros, who's a professor of psychology. I welcome all my guests aboard today. Thank you so much for being here with me.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, it's such an honor to have all of you on here to talk about this very important topic. You know, we know anxiety is sometimes the feeling of fear or apprehension or nervousness about doing something. So maybe you're going to give a speech for the first time, or you're starting the first day of school or a new job or whatever it may be. And it's okay to have that fear and apprehension. But I think when those feelings, you know, overload and they last more than they should, or they start interfering with your daily life, you know, that can turn into something a little bit more, maybe like anxiety disorder. And anxiety can stop you from enjoying your life and being around your loved ones and really just feeling fulfilled and satisfied. You know, so Laura, as a professor of psychology, I want to try to just gain a better understanding of anxiety versus anxiety disorder, or maybe extreme stress. You know, can you tell us a little bit about what can cause anxiety, and how do we know that it's going to become disruptive in our life? You know, how do we know the differences to look out for?
Right. Well, what's important to really understand about anxiety is that it is very much physiologically based. There are three stages in the general adaptation syndrome when it comes to our stress response. And we have activation of the alarm stage initially. And in that stage is the sympathetic nervous system, which is literally fight or flight. And that's our body, our brain telling us that, okay, you're in danger, you're being threatened here, and you need to respond. So we have to kind of like get control of that threshold and say, you know what, I'm not in any danger, I'm safe, and we have to reassure ourselves. And that really comes with practice and with trying to look at the situation in a new perspective, which is really hard to do in the moment. But you want to differentiate. You want to say, you know what, I understand you're trying to protect me, because it's really evolutionary. It's how we survived. It's how we've thrived as a species to be where we are at this time. And it's a matter of just understanding that, okay, this anxiety is just what I'm responding to physiologically. It's a stress response. And I don't feel very safe right now, but I just have to reassure myself that I am. And so hopefully the stress isn't prolonged, because the next stage is resistance. And that's actually us still trying to cope, still trying to meet with the demands of the stressors. But if it's ongoing, then we enter into exhaustion. And that's really when our resources have significantly depleted. And it's just really hard to kind of get control of anything at that moment. And it's in that moment that we feel really weakened and we're more susceptible to a number of illnesses. So it's really important to understand that when it comes to understanding how severe anxiety can be, you want to make sure that you're understanding the source of it and what you're really responding to. Like, is it just something that you're internalizing? Is it something that you're catastrophizing in some way? Like, are you feeding it, right? Because that can happen. You know, you can kind of get overwhelmed with the thoughts, right? And they kind of take you for a ride. And then before you know it, you're just like, oh my gosh, you know, where am I? Why am I thinking that this is going to happen? And you're just using your imagination in that regard, when you could actually be using it for what you do want to happen. And that's where you want to refocus that energy. And that's where you want to see it through. You know, it's a matter of, okay, what do you want to happen? So yes, it's very real, for sure.
So, and I'm hearing you talk,
Yeah.
and I know in my heart that you're speaking from the perspective of somebody who's also gone through it yourself in some way. I know that you talked about it and you opened up to us
Mhm.
about having postpartum and how that could affect you. And you've come such a long way, and I've seen you and how you progressed. And I just want to know, how are you staying healthy? How are you making that progression? How are you making that separation, like you said, to know you're going to be okay? You just
Right.
kind of have to separate those feelings and see how it can, help you to overcome it.
hmm And a lot of the time, it's just needing that time for myself. That's really what it is. Just taking that time for myself that I really needed for self-care, self-prioritizing my own mental health. And I started just taking walks every morning, and I found the fresh air and that's just being able to kind of re-energize and regroup, if you will,
Right.
was so helpful for my well-being, just for my emotional health, just to feel better and just to have more gratitude. I just started to
Right.
shift my thinking. It was just such a mind shift that I had. And I said, you know what? I want to be appreciative. I want to be grateful for everything that I have, because there is so much to be grateful for. And I found that once I started doing that, then I let the abundance really start to
Right.
flow. Because I think we tend to block our blessings. And I think it's so important, that we get out of our own way, and just kind of
Right.
let that flow to us. And
Right.
that's really what I started doing. I started just allowing myself to yes, feel what I needed to identify it, and then say, okay, well, this is what I want to do about it. And or maybe I don't want to feel this way anymore. So how can I deal with this?
Right.
And for me, like, things have to make sense. Like, I have to logically analyze it. I have to work it out, and I would just
That's the
take it
professor in
apart.
you.
Right.
Yeah, I would take it apart. I'm like, what's my triggers? What's going on here? What is really it? And I would just try to identify the root,
Yeah,
and just
exactly.
pull it apart. And I'm like, no, this is not going to have
Right.
that power over me anymore. I refuse to allow it because I wanted to be better.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, it's hard to reclaim that power.
Yeah.
It's hard to find that strength within
Yes.
you to ask for help. I love the fact that you're taking those walks and you're
Yes.
opening your heart to gratitude and
Mhm.
embracing change and just trying to be courageous and encouraged. And, Jenny, I know that you yourself are talking about embracing change, or going through some of the same issues. And I know that this is all kind of new to you. And you also poured out your heart to us, opening up about some of the new things that are happening in your life with heightened anxiety. And I know that you are seeing a therapist, which I commend you for, hands down. And I think that's wonderful. And I
Thank
just
you.
want to know, from your point of view, why do you think it's happening? Maybe what are some of the triggers or patterns that you're noticing that can probably help other people out there who may be listening and can sort of just try to, relate to what you're going through?
Yeah, those are great questions because this is something that's very new to me. I think we spoke about in previous webinars how I'm pretty much used to being the one that's the caregiver, having close relationships with people that have anxiety, depression, so I'm always looking after them, right? But I know about self-care, and how the mind works and things like that. And I try to practice it, but apparently I haven't been doing such a great job, right? Because we all get stressed, overwhelmed, burnout, things like that, right? So when I recently started seeing a counselor who I am very confident with. Actually, I started seeing him for another reason. And then of course, when you think you're going for one thing, but then it turns on you, right? And you have to look at yourself and like what's going on in your life. So
Self-awareness.
self-awareness. So when he told me, from the things that I shared with him, that it sounds like I have a little bit more anxiety than I realized, or I think.
Right.
That was very interesting to me. Everyone has anxiety, we just deal with it in a different way, or we function at different levels, right? So it's been frustrating because since then I've had like 2 anxiety attacks in social gatherings. I'm not sure if it's a social anxiety because I'm a very social person. But again, we had with COVID and the pandemic and everything, I am used to staying at home and being around my family more, and just my husband, not so much like out and about. But it was frustrating when this happened because I'm not sure what the trigger is yet. I'm still working through that. And I'm the type of person that like, I need to know, I have to have control and like know what's going on. Right. So that's just something that I'm working through. I listened to a couple of podcasts about anxiety, one of them being Laura's earlier today. And another one, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jay Shetty.
Yes.
So I was listening to his podcast just earlier, and he was talking about like 5 ways that you can, or some ways that you can calm anxiety. And he was talking about like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. So it's like when you're feeling like anxiety, you know, like creep up, and because it's all in your mind, right? The mind is very powerful. So he says like, what are the, to take you back to the present moment by like looking around and saying, what are 5 things that I see in the room right now? Then what are 4 things that I can touch? What are 3 things that I can hear? What are 2 things that I can, did you say taste? No, taste was the first one. Sorry. Smell. Yes. 2 things that you can smell, and the 1 thing that you can taste to bring you back to the present moment.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. Right. So that's something that I'm going to start using. Actually, I'm traveling soon. And because I had these 2 anxiety attacks, like, you know, within like 5 days, 4 or 5 days of each other, which has never happened ever to me before. I already started having anxiety about traveling and being with my family, you know, for like 10 days and be like, oh my gosh, what if this happens to me when I'm with them? This is not supposed to happen to me. You know, like I'm a happy, positive person. So yes, this is all very new to me. So I'm so grateful for this webinar. And like, I'm just going to be listening to everything that you ladies are going to be putting down, because I will be picking it up. So
well, I
that's
think,
what's going on with me.
Although it's new to you, Jenny, I think that you were handling it really well. And the fact that you've reached out for support and help says it all in itself. I love the fact that you're listening to podcasts, you're developing that self-awareness, you're trying to develop more knowledge to really understand what's happening to yourself, because that's the first step. You know, once you accept what's happening, you really have to empower yourself with the proper knowledge to know how to move forward and to know how to help yourself. So I love the fact that you're doing that. And you mentioned anxiety about traveling, and it's so funny that you said that, because I'm going to be traveling soon also, and I have a little bit of heightened anxiety about, you know, traveling as well, because we haven't traveled since the height of the pandemic, number one. And you know, I, as you all know, being diagnosed with Parkinson's, you know, I'm a little wary about making sure that I have everything I need and it's going to be an okay flight, but also about seeing family and spending the long time with family as well, like you mentioned, and knowing if I'm going to be okay, and you know, if I'm going to be different, or if my anxiety is going to be heightened. And I don't know that I actually have anxiety, but I think like you, Jenny, I'm still like working towards, like, I'm still trying to understand, like sometimes I feel that in my stomach or in my heart, where it's like, oh my God, I'm a little nervous about doing this. I'm a little nervous about taking that step. So I definitely hear what you're saying. So like I said in the beginning, there's so many different layers to peel off of this topic, and there's so many different ways that you can think about it. But the important thing is that we're all making stepping stones towards progression. And which is why I love that we're all here. You know, for Bianca, I know we talked a little bit about during the pandemic, we've seen how people were directly impacted by anxiety, especially during that time. And I think you mentioned a little bit about your family and how some of them were affected with COVID, and how you sort of had to grapple with some of those unfortunate circumstances, which may have led to maybe anxiety, maybe a little bit of stress. So, you know, I want to hear your perspective on, especially during the height of the pandemic, how you handled that and how you sort of, you know, made your way through that.
Well, thanks, ladies, for sharing, and thank you for having me here. And I definitely commend you both in just kind of being proactive and addressing what you need to do for yourself. So that's amazing. It's just to give a little insight. So I come from, I guess, a more traumatic childhood, and I learned very early on how to do self-therapy for myself. And when I was younger, I went to a therapist, and they pretty much said, do you really need me? Because you just answered all your questions. And I said, okay, well, maybe we're just talking as friends, because I don't want to open up to anyone else. And so I realized that sitting myself down as a young woman and really thinking about the problem and taking it one step at a time. Some of you guys mentioned, you know, just going out there and getting fresh air and just being in the moment and being mindful. And I do that now. I can't stress just taking that time for yourself, and just being mindful when you're stressed, when you have that heightened anxiety, when there's a situation you can't control, to take that time for yourself. I'm also a big believer that, if you have something that's in that needs to go out, there is nothing wrong with going to the top of a rooftop or to a park where you're empty and yelling and screaming out all your emotions. And just dealing with your fears and your emotions at that very moment. I think where anxiety builds, at least from my experiences with myself and with my loved ones, is when it's a situation that you can't control. And I learned early on that just you can't control it. I try to stress that with my daughter, when she was 2 or 3 and she was dropping water all over the place. And as a parent, your first response, because you're already heightened as it is, right? Because you're like, oh my God, I have a child and I've got to take care of them. You're like, you got to control yourself and make sure that you're not going to get upset. And the kid looks at you and they're like, is mama going to be upset? What's the next step? And I'm like, don't worry about it. It happens. Look. And I poured some water on the floor and said, listen, don't stress about it. What do we do now? She's like, Mama, we clean it up. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. You deal with the problem at hand and you take a deep breath and you don't let it bother you. We do this, we've always done breathing techniques now for several years. I think since she was born, honestly. And one of the things that we're doing now, it's like, okay, breathe in the flowers and blow on the soup. And so I'm very conscious with her to be like, Amelia, baby, just pause for a second and let's just breathe. And it's to the point that when my daughter sees that I'm getting a little stressed, she goes, Mama, you need to breathe. And I'm like, you're right, let's breathe together. So I can definitely relate to some of the things that you guys said, and just being in the present moment and dealing with what you need to. Heightened anxiety during the pandemic. I think, first of all, my whole family, my immediate family here, all had COVID in March. Ambulances going off every 2 minutes, every minute. Everyone, just the city completely empty. I remember just taking the bike once I was better and driving around Manhattan and Times Square, riding the bike and taking photos, and maybe one person or 2 people 5 blocks down. It was kind of out of a horror movie. And me having a child, I think is what really caused the anxiety. How can I help her? How can I soothe her? How can I relax her when all she wants to do is go outside, get ice cream, play in the parks? And the questions that I received was, why are the parks closed? Why are there more homeless people outside? Why is that person living outside? How can we help? And so I had to take these moments, like every other parent that I'm sure, and just do the very best that we could do, right? Try to explain the situation and start putting YouTube videos. Thankfully, some creators started creating YouTube videos just to help explain the pandemic and explain the virus, and just being very open. I have a very open household. We try to discuss as much as possible. We talk about our day. We talk about how we feel. I ask her every single day. I remind her in the morning, and then I ask her when I pick her up, what's one kind thing that you did? What's one nice thing that you did? And what made you feel happy today? What made you feel empowered? And 1, to get the conversation going, because I know it's going to just dwindle as she gets older. Right, yeah. And 2, to really just keep her in the middle of just being mindful of everything that she does. I think the pandemic itself, having COVID, almost having my partner had to go to the hospital, not knowing what to expect, and then dealing with family members that had, a more severe medical conditions. Unfortunately, losing my grandmother, who's like my mother, during the end of the year, of the pandemic, really when things were slowing down, and not being able to go to Florida, not being able to say goodbye, has really caused some stress in my family, I mean, and in my larger sense of family, and sitting down and talking to them and just, how do you calm things down? And as I said before, you guys have listed a lot of great things to do. And I can't stress just taking that time. I've had other friends where they've never been able to do this. Imagine your life is traveling and you're having to now just stop and you don't know what to do. You're a single person, no kid, no family, living at home, and you've been traveling for work, but traveling for leisure, and now you're on lockdown. And so I think the virus and just the stress that's come across this past year has really affected many people, from kids not understanding to dealing with their feelings to try to explain that, because kids are still learning about their emotions, to even adults that now are in a position where they have to sit down and really talk to themselves. And maybe they use the outside world as more as a distraction. And now they're really dealing with their internal emotions more than ever. So I think this is a really important topic. I think now more than ever, there are things that need to be spoken to our children about. We should come from a real open place, not only in our hearts, but in the way we have conversations. I think it's essential right now that we really talk about how we can support each other, and how the willingness to have these conversations shouldn't be looked at, frowned upon. We see what's going on in the news. We see that there's a need for open dialogue in everything, not just in political and in Black Lives Matter, not just the pandemic, but just, humans, just the individual, just having an open floor conversation about how we feel, and then acknowledging that feeling and supporting each other in that journey to get to a safe place. So I'd have to say, for me, this conversation has become more of a topic for me and my loved ones. And I've seen a lot of people go through a lot of traumatic experiences just because of the virus. And I think this is wonderful that you guys are doing.
Yeah. So, Bianca, thank you so much for sharing. And you brought up some really good points. I know the height of the pandemic opened up a lot of challenges, a lot of grief, a lot of stress for people. But I'm just going to take the other side of it and say that I also think it gave people the opportunity to learn about self-awareness, to learn about self-development, Absolutely. To really try to develop some of those good routines and habits. All of you talked about some good things and habits that we should be doing each day. I know for myself, Laura, you mentioned walking. Exercise is so important. Exercise releases those happy dopamine levels in your brain, believe it or not, and those endorphins, which can help to increase the mood and how you feel each day. Eating, diet, what you put into your body makes a huge difference with how you feel and how you think, the decisions that you make, how you react. So you really have to pick up a healthy diet. Meditation, you all talked about mindfulness and meditation. Bianca, I love that I think you said just breathe, take a minute and breathe with your daughter. I love that. And teaching your children that is amazing, and it has to trickle down. If it starts with you, it has to trickle down to your children, and it has to trickle down to your entire family as well. I think also what I've done a little bit in the past is journaling, maybe sometimes writing down some of my thoughts, whether they're thoughts of anger, frustration, sadness, and just putting it on paper. That sort of helps me get it out a little bit too. So I think those are all just some helpful tips. Bianca, you talked a lot about kids, and this is something that we had Candace Aguirre-Holly, was supposed to join us today. Unfortunately, Candace is a philanthropist and a community activist. So she's out doing some great things in the community as we speak. But before we came on, she actually told us about, the importance of talking to children about mental health, because they are exposed to so much in the world today. They are experiencing so much at school, in the news, at home. Imagine us 4 adults and the things that we're experiencing and how we're internalizing it. So let's turn that around to kids and how they're internalizing it. Mm-hmm. So we have to think about it from their perspective and how we can help them as well. So I think this is an important conversation all around. And I love the fact that all of you came on board today and poured your heart out, and you really are going to help other people to make a difference. Laura, I know being a professor, you've probably seen it the most with maybe some of the college kids as well, in terms of like in the height of the pandemic when they were remote learning and things like that. And I'm sure you've seen, how they can internalize that also, right?
Absolutely. And Bianca, I love what you said with your daughter, how just literally like inhale, like smell the flowers and then blow the bubbles out, because we do something similar with my son. We say deep breaths, and it's to the point where when he gets upset or if he sees his other friends upset, he tells them deep breaths. Like even if it's like some strange, child that we see that's like really upset.
That's great.
He's like, deep breaths. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like
I love that. Yeah,
this little like wellness coach. It's amazing.
Because you're teaching him well, that's why.
Yes,
And that's what it's all
exactly.
about, is teaching your kids well and teaching them
And
to do
we
what
model,
you're doing.
yes, and you have to model that behavior, right?
Yeah,
You have to
yeah,
instill that in them, like these coping skills. They have to see you, embody it. You have to be that for them,
right,
right? And
right,
so then it's all of it is learned, right? And it's
right.
internalized, it's learned, and it's like, okay, well, this, and also it's like they have to know that their feelings are safe with us. We're home.
Yeah.
We're always
Yeah.
home. And that is the foundation for everything in their lives. That's how they learn that they set boundaries, that they encourage healthy relationships, and what they will and will not stand for. It all starts with us. And we have to make sure that they always know that this is home, we are home, they're always safe with us.
Right.
And it really begins with us.
No, it does. And
Always.
it's definitely a work in progress all the
Yeah.
way around. And I think we're all doing that. Again, Jenny, I think that you're doing an amazing job with trying to combat what's happening. And I know you will figure it out. And I know it's going to take a village to help, which we're all here to help. And you have the community support as well. But, keep doing what you're doing, because it seems to me that you're staying healthy. I mean, you're in a ton of webinars. You're part of the Empowering Minds. You're a boss.
I am keeping busy. Yes.
You're keeping busy. You're keeping it moving, and I love that. So you obviously have some good stuff going on that's keeping you healthy, right?
Yes, thanks so much. And so two things, well, I learned a lot during this entire webinar so far. But Laura, you totally reminded me when you said about like getting exercise, walking and stuff.
Yeah.
I actually realized just in now, like I haven't been working out as much as I used to. So I'm like, maybe that's part of it. Like I was so used to running and walking like almost every single day. And it's been like over maybe like a month and a half or so that I haven't been very consistent with my workouts. So I'm like, crap, that must be part of it. So I'm gonna get back on that.
You said that, because I think that's kind of what happened with me. Like when I change my routine up and like I stop exercising for like a couple days, or I just get busy, I can feel it in my body and I can feel the stress. Like right now, I was telling Laura before we got on the webinar, my neck is killing me right now. Like I need to do some more exercising, because I haven't been doing my regular neck exercises. And I mean, and all this can lead to those oxidative stress and the inflammation in your body, which in turn leads, you can internalize that, and that leads to the depression, to the anxiety, to the extreme stress. So all of these things are connected. I know I always tell you guys this at Simply Healthy and Organic. I always believe in a very integrated approach, which is what I always preach, and I always say, because I totally believe that. I totally believe that everything has to come together. Your mind, body, connection, soul, everything has to be in one, and you really have to look at everything and try to put it all together and embrace it, piece by piece. So
it's so true, and that's so good. The one other thing I wanted to mention was what Bianca, when you were saying that you ask your daughter, like, what made you happy today, or what kind of act did you do today? That's like should be for all of us. That's a great reminder for adults as well, because when we're not feeling well, one day, or like we just have to stop and think about these things, right? So I love that.
Yeah, Bianca,
that's good. I mean, I'm not always getting the answer I want. Sometimes I'm like, what did you do today to help someone? She's like, I don't know. I knocked the tower off for Jimmy. And I'm like, okay.
Well, hey, at least
I'm glad you helped him.
Yes. And she's honest.
So, yeah. And I can't ask for anything more than that, right?
Right. It's so beautiful how kids are so innocent at this age, and that beauty is just, that's what we have to take in and embrace, especially at times during the pandemic. So that's just, it's so nice to hear that. It really is.
One other thing, and I don't know, maybe this will help or will help whoever listens. I'm very aware of being grounded, and so when I'm not grounded, I go on the floor. And when I'm not grounded, I'll walk with no shoes on grass, or my safe place is the beach if I can go there.
Connect with nature.
And one of the things that I've started to do with my daughter, that I do for myself, and I think when my partner first saw me doing this years ago, she was like, what are you doing? And I'm just laying on the floor, and I'm just going to help my back, because that's a good thing to do for your back anyway. And I'm just gonna breathe, and I'm just going to not think about anything, and just think about how I'm stretching out my body. Or rubbing my feet against the sand and listening to the ocean, or putting my Bluetooth headphones on and listening to something that's soothing. I think just trying to keep yourself grounded and listening to the right type of, meditation, or listening to the right type of music. I've always listened to classical music and jazz. I always start my day with classical music and typically end my day with jazz. Don't get me wrong. I love my hip hop. I love my Latin music. But there's a time and a place. And if my world around me is a little bit more havoc, then I try to be more prone to doing as many things as I can that I know will keep me grounded and positive, whether it's I signed up for a positive quote a day, so I get a text message, anything that'll help to just keep you grounded. So I guess my rule of thumb is find out the things that work for you, whether it's music, whether it's quotes, whether it's just reading certain poems, whether it's watching a YouTube video, as you said before, Jenny, of certain podcasters or videocasters. I love what some of the stuff that some of these people are putting out. Not only do I get to know about other people's cultures, but I get to know about their habits. I get to know what's working out for them. Right. I think that there's something out there for everyone. And I think we should continue having this conversation. We should continue talking about ways on how to help our kids. Right. And, like you ladies said, we lead by example. And hey, the scientists say it's from like 0 to 6. These are, from birth to 6, these are their most important years. But but after that, you're still teaching them. They're still learning, right? So let's just keep doing what we're doing as just, citizens of the world, if you will, and just try to be more mindful of what our approach and of others.
So, something you just said was how you start your day, which is so important. A morning routine is so crucial to how the rest of your day is going to fall into place. And Bianca just said that. And Jenny, I think I told you one day I decided to go outside and sit down with my cup of coffee, and I heard the birds chirping. I heard the trees ruffling. I even heard trucks passing by. But believe it or not, it was so peaceful. It was so calming. I just let it all out. I just embraced all of the serenity and the peace. And I actually did a podcast while I was sitting out there about nature, because like Bianca just said, embracing nature is just so beautiful and it's so calming. So I love that you said that. Yeah, finding a morning routine, I think, is really important to your day as well. How you start your day, whether an exercise routine, a morning affirmations, visualizations, meditation, breathing. Affirmations, I just want to stress, are so important. I know I have a book of affirmations that I do every morning. I look at it, I open it, I say, this is what I'm going to accomplish today. This is who I am today. I am courageous. I am determined. I am beautiful. I am brave. Make your own affirmations. Make it work for you. You have to find, like you said, what works for you. I think it's good to catch something that you find to be creative, that can fuel your energy, that can fuel your inspiration, and just keep you healthy.
I love that you said affirmations, because I've been doing it in the mirror with my daughter while I do her hair since she was 3. And just A, getting her to speak, and B, getting her to just stay in that moment. And if we don't do it in the mirror, we're doing it on the way home or to school. So yeah, I just love one another and love yourself. That's all I can really say about
Yes. Thank you, ladies. This has been a great conversation. All of you have brought such energy and good vibes to the table, and I know that you all are on your path to doing great things. Any lasting thoughts or wisdom or nuggets for our listeners out there?
Well, I think Tony Robbins is the one that said, like, where your focus goes, your energy flows. So be self-aware. I mean, you are totally capable of pulling yourself up every time you fall down.
Love it.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you, ladies, so much. And we will talk to everybody soon. Of course, stay healthy, stay happy, and keep doing whatever you're doing to make sure your families and your loved ones are staying safe. And of course, we always say, if you do need help and support, please reach out. Please make sure you get the help that you need.